My name is Harold Bennett. I'm 86 years old. I don't know exactly how much time I have left. The doctors stopped speaking in numbers a while ago. Now they just say things like comfortable and rest. So I thought I would sit here tonight with this small red light blinking on the camera and say something I should have said years ago. Not as advice, just as a memory. I used to think living a long life required something grand, some secret no one else knew. I read magazines in my 40s that promised decades if I followed certain plans. I bought expensive supplements once, lined them up in the kitchen like trophies. I tried complicated diets that made dinner feel like homework. And still, time kept moving. The truth didn't come to me all at once. It crept in quietly, the way evening light moves across the floor. When I was a boy, my grandmother lived with us. She was small, sharp-eyed, and never in a hurry. She lived to 94. Back then, that felt impossible. She ate the same breakfast almost every day. Oats simmered slowly on the stove, a sliced apple, a handful of walnuts she kept in a glass jar, sometimes a spoonful of honey. Nothing dramatic, nothing expensive. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, my feet not yet touching the floor, watching steam rise from her bowl. She would chew slowly, not because she was performing some ritual. That was just how she ate. At the time, I thought it was boring. When I grew older, I chased flavor and speed. Coffee gulped down while tying my shoes, lunch from a drive-thru eaten in the car, late dinners heavy with meat and salt because I believed I had earned it after a long day. I felt strong then, untouchable. My body answered every demand without complaint. In my 30s, I could eat anything and wake up clear-head. In my 40s, I began to feel the edges, a heaviness after meals, a dull ache behind my eyes. I ignored it. Everyone I knew ignored it. We joked about antacids the way our fathers joked about cigarettes. By 52, I had my first scare. Chest tightness, a night in the hospital, bright lights and wires attached to my chest. The doctor said it wasn't a heart attack, but it was a warning. I remember lying there staring at the ceiling tiles, thinking about my grandmother's kitchen, the oats, the apple. It felt absurd that something so plain could matter. But I went home and I changed one small thing. Not everything, just one thing. I started eating breakfast at the table, not in the car, not standing over the sink. I began with oatmeal again. It tasted bland at first. I almost laughed at myself, but I kept eating it. I added berries when they were in season, almonds when walnuts felt too hard on my teeth, yogurt sometimes, eggs with spinach on other mornings. Simple food. Food that looked like what it was. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't announce it as a new chapter. It felt private, almost embarrassingly small. But something shifted. It wasn't dramatic. I didn't wake up transformed. There were no before and after photos. Just a steadiness that began to grow. My afternoons felt less foggy. My temper softened. I didn't crash the way I used to. Over time, other changes followed. Not because I was chasing a longer life, but because I started noticing how my body responded. A bowl of lentils and vegetables left me lighter than a plate of fried food. A piece of fruit in the evening felt kinder than the cookies I used to reach for without thinking. I still ate cake at birthdays. I still had steak on special occasions. Life didn't become strict or narrow. It just became quieter. And in that quiet, I began to feel time differently. When I turned 65, many of my friends started collecting prescriptions. Some of them laughed about it, others grew silent. One of my closest friends, Martin, loved heavy meals. He called them real food. Thick sausages, white bread soaked in butter, desserts every night. He wasn't careless, he just didn't think it mattered. He used to say, "We're all going to die anyway." He passed away at 72. I stood at his funeral, looking at his photograph, and felt a strange mixture of grief and recognition. We had both believed we were invincible once. We had both postponed small changes because they felt insignificant. The cost of waiting doesn't arrive all at once. It accumulates quietly like dust on a shelf you forget to wipe. I didn't become perfect after that. I still have regrets. I wish I had understood earlier that the body keeps score in ways that don't show up immediately. In my 70s, I noticed something else. Eating slowly had become a kind of anchor. I would sit by the window in the morning, sunlight touching the table, and take my time. Oats, fruit, nuts, sometimes avocado on whole grain toast, sometimes a simple bowl of beans with olive oil and herbs. Nothing extraordinary, but steady. And I began to see that the steadiness itself was the point. Not excitement, not extremes, just daily kindness. I didn't frame it that way at first. I only knew that I felt held, as if my body trusted me more. Trust is something you build over years, and years, I learned, are built from ordinary mornings. When my wife, Eleanor, was diagnosed with cancer at 68, our world shrank overnight. Hospitals have a smell you never forget. Clean, but not clean enough to erase fear. During her treatments, she couldn't keep much down. The food she once loved became unbearable to her. Rich sauces, sweet desserts, even coffee. What she could manage were the simplest things: broth, soft vegetables, plain rice, yogurt, sliced pears. I would sit beside her hospital bed and feed her small spoonfuls, waiting between bites, watching her swallow, watching her breathe. There was something humbling about it. All the complicated meals we had eaten over decades suddenly seemed unnecessary. In that room, nourishment was reduced to its quiet essence, energy, gentle sustenance, enough to carry her through another day. She lived 5 more years after that diagnosis, 5 years that felt borrowed and precious. In those years, we ate differently together, not as a strategy, not as a rebellion against illness, just because her body demanded softness. We shared bowls of vegetable soup at the kitchen table, oatmeal in the mornings again, fresh berries in summer, handfuls of almonds in the afternoon. Sometimes she would look at me and smile faintly and say, "This is enough." When she passed, the house became unbearably silent. The chair across from me at breakfast sat empty. I considered abandoning the routine. It felt pointless to cook for one, but I kept making the same simple meals, not because I believed they would make me immortal, but because they reminded me of care. Years went by. My hair thinned, my hands grew unsteady. The world outside changed faster than I could keep up with. New diets became fashionable, new superfoods were praised and then forgotten. I stayed with what I knew. Whole foods, familiar textures, colors that came from the earth. There is something deeply human about eating the same nourishing things day after day. It becomes less about taste and more about continuity, a thread that ties one year to the next.